Welcome to the Ultra Origins series, where we hear from runners who have recently finished their first ultra or completed a new distance. In these conversations, we celebrate regular people who are doing hard things. There's a lot we can learn from and be inspired by from people just like you. In this episode, we meet April Shrum, who at the end of September ran the Mountain Lakes 100, her first time training for and completing that distance. April shares her journey from marathons to completing 100 miles with grit and determination. Well, April, thank you so much for coming on Ultra Origins to share your story of running this next big ultra that you recently ran, 100 miles. But before we get into your story of the Mountain Lakes 100 and your run there, I would love to just have you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and as much as you'd like to say. Tell us a little bit about your history and tell us about what you did before running, and then we can get into your journey into running and into ultra running.
All right. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, and left there as a late teenager and moved to Colorado and worked in the ski industry for a little while and was failing at that and joined the Coast Guard. I was active duty for 4 years and met my husband, who I swore I'd never date anybody in blue, and decided that I met the one who was actually active duty also. That was back early 2000s, and I went over to Iraq. It was during that time frame and had the choice to either stay in or get out then. And kind of between the two of us decided that it was better for me to get out and for him to stay in. So after that experience, it was time to start our family. And then we just traveled around. My husband just retired recently, and so we spent the last 20 years following him around the country and have teenagers, and so we have these big humans with us too. So we've lived a lot of places and gotten to experience a lot of different places in the world and different parts. Even though it's the Coast Guard, they actually send us all over. And this is our third time in Bremerton, Washington. This time was by choice. The other two were by assignment. So yeah. So we landed here, and I don't ever plan on living anywhere else.
What is it you like about living on the peninsula?
The Olympic Mountains are 40 miles away. It's a little bit convoluted because of the ocean in between us. There's lots of little inlets, so we have to kind of drive around the Hood Canal to get over there. And then there's a huge running community and a group of middle-aged women that are all doing the same thing out here. And it's really fun because I've never experienced that other places, where they're all just into big, fun, adventurous things and still kind of juggling life as a mom and, human.
So you have a community there of like-minded individuals?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's so helpful.
There are a sprinkle of men in the group as well, but
Well, how long have you been running?
I started, I want to say like 2007, after my youngest was born. Started walking on a treadmill in a gym just to get away from little people for a little while, and then slowly picked up my pace, and that kind of morphed into road running, half marathons and marathons. And then I met the wrong crowd and kind of slippery sloped into ultras.
Yeah, I know that. So how long ago was that?
For ultras, 2015 was my first 50K.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So it's been a little while.
You and I are on a similar schedule because my first 50K was also in 2015.
Okay.
What was it? Was it just the bad influence of other runners that brought you into the ultra game, or was there something else that helped inspire you?
No, it was really the wrong crowd at the right time. Okay. I found trail running and realized that road running was kind of the gateway, but not really my passion. Love trail running, and there really aren't short trail races around, at least around here. There isn't anything shorter than a 50K available on a regular basis. So that kind of spurred on the distance.
And so that was almost, I guess, 9 years ago that you ran your first 50K. Have you been running ultras for the last several years?
Yeah, pretty consistently since then. I've been doing that in Hawaii. And so we lived in Hawaii for 4 years before coming back to Washington again. So I ran out there, which I'm not a hot weather runner. So that was a whole different thing, a different level of sweat than I was used to for sure. And the trails out on Oahu are really steep and rooty. I know Hurt 100 has a pretty good reputation for that reason. So if you ever see that course, it's
I've seen pictures of the routes at Hurt, and it looks really dangerous.
It really is. I don't know how people run that fast on them. one hurt loop took me like 8.5 hours. It's just,
Oh
and they
yeah.
have to do it 5 times. It's crazy.
Well, now I get from social media that you're also a hiker. Has hiking also been something that's been a part of your journey for a long time?
I really like backpacking. So I grew up backpacking with my dad, kind of forced marches in
Hmm.
Arizona, and we didn't have tents. We used to just cowboy camp, and so that was part of my childhood. I really enjoyed. And again, this group of ladies that are here all backpack together. So I frequently take week long trips doing big miles backpacking, and we're all ultra runners. So we kind of push the boundaries of our daily limit for really it's the food you can carry while you're
Yeah.
doing that kind of miles because you have to feed yourself while you're in the
Hmm.
backcountry. But that's my happy vacations when I can kind of sneak away and just do my own thing. It's backpacking for sure.
Are you doing fast packing when you're doing this, or is it just a more traditional slow backpacking?
Um, Slow-ish backpacking. We usually kind
Okay.
of exceed the normal backpacking miles. I have a light kit, but it's not a fast pack. I have fast packed where you do one night in the backcountry and pop out in a different location type of
Hmm.
thing. But this is, pretty traditional backpacking where you're carrying everything with you and you go multiple days and not
Wow.
running at all.
Yeah. Okay. So after running several years worth of ultra marathons, something inspired you that you were going to finally do a 100 miler this year. So what led you to this decision? Was more bad influences?
No, I've done a couple 100Ks and
Hmm.
really enjoy that distance and thought, if I can enjoy that distance and go to work the next day and feel pretty good with myself, why not try to do something a little bit bigger? And I felt like the next thing after 100K would be the 100 miler. So I just figured, why not throw my hat in the ring and give it a try? And it was
Yeah.
something kind of wild. Like, I'm not fast or very nimble on trails. So it was just kind of a risky gamble to put it out there.
Well, once you decided that you were going to be training for and running a 100 miler, did you change the way you trained or anything about your running schedule? Did that become different?
It did. I actually started running less, which sounds
Oh.
ridiculous. But I did the Laz has this crazy virtual race across Tennessee. And I've always done the
Mm.
out and back for like the last 4 years. So I was running like 13 miles a day for the entire summer for 4 months straight
Oh,
so that I could do the double crossing of it. Sorry, I have a pup jumping on me.
that's okay.
um, and um, and this year I actually stuck to a training plan with scheduled rest days, which was really
Mm.
different because I had been running not a running streak, but I'd been running big consistent miles every single day to get these like dumb virtual races done, which it's
Yeah.
like self motivating for me. And so that changed a lot. Doing consistent miles, but actually taking rest days on schedule, which was really hard for me because I'm a stress relief runner.
Yeah.
So a rest day isn't always like what my brain needs.
How many rest days were you doing each week?
2 times a week.
Okay.
So I had two consistent Mondays and Fridays were rest days. And I would lift a lot as well during that. And that was new for me. I work in a physical therapy environment. And so I have people exercise all day and I do some
Yeah.
exercises with them, but I started lifting more getting ready for this run. So that was the other big change.
So you incorporated strength training together with a consistent schedule that included rest days.
Yes.
That sounds so well thought out.
Yeah.
Sounds very grown up.
Yeah. For the first time, because usually I run reckless.
And then were you working with a coach or is this all self-directed?
Just self-directed. I have some friends that have been pretty successful 100-mile runners, and so I took their training plans and looked at it and kind of did a
Okay.
hybrid of two or three plans and figured out what would fit into my world with work and kids and in life.
Hmm.
So yeah, no coach.
And how long was the time period from you've decided you're going to do the 100 miler and you start training for it to the race start? How much of a training period are we talking about?
So it was about 28 weeks. I started in March for a
Okay.
September race, but in March, right before the training plan started, I ran a 100K. I was already running substantial miles before the training plan went into
Yeah.
effect. And so I actually went backwards pretty far at the beginning of it, shortening my distances on my weekends, starting with an 18-mile long run instead of in the 20s or 30s. It was good.
Yeah. So you're starting with quite a good base already.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how about gear and practicing with gear specifically for this event? When did you start to integrate that? And let's talk about the gear that you were practicing with.
I didn't change anything with my gear than I had already previously been running with. So it's same shoes. I mean, I have multiples of the same shoe, but
Mm-hmm.
same model of shoe, same poles, same vest, same pants. The shirts are always interchangeable. Pants really aren't. I'm very sweaty and I build up salt quickly, so I chafe quite a bit. So I have to
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure that the pants were the ones that don't chafe me, basically.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Once you find that, that's gold, right?
Yeah. I wish I had trained with my poles a whole lot more. I picked up my poles at mile 40 in this race and realized I needed them because of the terrain, but realized by about mile 70 that both of my elbows were killing me and my triceps were just shot. And so I just didn't train enough with my poles, actually
Yeah.
doing the
Okay.
work with them. I ran with them and hike with them, but it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. How about nutrition and hydration? Were you thinking about what you're going to be using during the race, during your training?
I did. Yeah, a lot. I've ditched gels completely. I don't take any off the shelf gels. I eat real food. And some of it's junk and some of it's pretty good. So I do a
Mm-hmm.
combination of dates and macadamia nuts for some of the better stuff, and Pop Tarts, the Uncrustable peanut butter and jellies, and string cheese I really like to eat. And Nerds gummy clusters are probably like the finest candy on the planet.
I keep seeing you post about those on
They're
social
so
media. I
good,
really
so
have to
good.
follow your advice.
They're never bad. So like I have a pretty iron stomach. My work wife calls me a trash panda. My husband has affectionately called me a trash compactor because I can pretty much eat anything. And so I don't have to worry about my stomach or having GI issues when I'm running. I feel like real food has helped me quite a bit. And then hydration, I do a combination of just straight water in my bladder in the back, and then I have a soft flask of electrolytes. And I use Scratch. They actually had a fizzy one at the race that I didn't like at all. So I was missing Scratch. I didn't put enough in my drop bags. I should have carried some more with me. So, and then I have salt tablets because I'm a really heavy sweater and need
Yeah.
more salt than that. But yeah, all of my long runs, I did the same nutrition plan as I did at the race, and it worked out really well. And then anything that was on the table was fair game for me at aid stations because I don't get upset stomachs. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this event. So why don't you tell us what the 100-miler is that you had signed up for, when the date was, and then I guess it'd be kind of fun to have you sort of recap the event and how it went and surprises along the way. But yeah, let's just start off by saying what this event was, and why don't you lead us into it?
Sure. So Mountain Lakes 100 in Oregon was what I chose. And it's a first come, first serve, fast and furious sign up, early January. So I was on Ultra sign up with my keyboard ready to go. I just knew that was the one. I knew someone that had ran it and really had a great race. And they had run it in 2018. And since then it's burnt. So the race course is dramatically different than what I was anticipating. And I didn't do quite enough research into the race about it. I knew that it was in a beautiful place and that it was a very doable race for me as far as it's pretty low elevation. It only has 11,000, almost 12,000 feet, but over 100 miles. That's pretty reasonable. And a lot of it's on the
Yeah.
Pacific Crest Trail, which is, as my inner backpacker, that's a dream to go on. So
Yeah.
that's why I chose it. It's the location of it and
Mm-hmm.
knowing somebody that had done it before. And it was on September 21st this year.
Right. Okay. And that race company, Go Beyond Racing, I'll give an ad for them for the audience. They produce really, really great races. They're probably some of the nicest people and just really good. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, super supportive humans out there wanting everybody to succeed. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're on it as far as their race course goes, and their staff and all of the volunteers that they had were fantastic. But like the race directors that were out there, I don't know their names. I'm really terrible at names, actually. I have good facial recognition.
Todd and Renee are the names.
So Renee was doing the pre-race speech, and they mark their courses with these little orange cones that look like soccer drill cones from when you were kids. They're short with a little hole in them. And Renee said, every time you pass one of those, tell yourself that you're awesome. and they mark it every quarter of a mile, that entire race, these little orange cones. So out loud, every single cone I pass, I'm like, I'm awesome. I'm awesome the entire way. And I told her that when I finished, I was like, hey, I just want you to know that I actually called myself awesome, which is not in my nature. Every time I passed one of those all night long, all day long, it was pretty neat. So
I love that.
yeah, really good people are out there for that race.
Well, how did you feel when you were at the starting line about to take on this adventure after all the training you'd been doing and a lot of anticipation, a lot of mental planning? I certainly know watching you on social media, I could tell that you were excited about this event and you were really anticipating it. So what were your emotions like? Did you have any butterflies or anything?
Yeah, it was actually the first time I've been nervous about a race in a long time. I used to get nervous really early on in my running career. You get up to the start line and the big corrals of marathons, and you're like standing with 25,000 people, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And I had those
Yeah.
pre race jitters again for the first time in many years. Like, I haven't had that in a long time. It's interesting because you're there and everybody has all of their fast gear and they look super fast. You have all these thoughts about everybody else being out there being super prepared. And I ran all of the miles that I could to prepare for this. So I knew that I was ready for it, but I don't see myself in the same light as a lot of the athletes that are out there. And it's like, why do I have the audacity to even show up? And that's what I was feeling at the start line. Like, oh my gosh, why am I even trying this? Not that I wasn't nervous to do it. It was just like, whew, what in the world am I doing? I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense to be able to put into tangible feelings, but I was super excited and joyful that I was there and not injured at the start line, just to even give it a good go. I actually slept the night before, which is
Oh, wow.
amazing. I've been battling not sleeping through the night for a while. So I had a really good night's sleep and I was like, all right. And it's a long drive out there. We had to wake up
Mm-hmm.
pretty early to get to the start line. I was excited and ready to go. It was very cold and I wasn't expecting that. It was in the 30s, which isn't a bad thing for me because I'm a sweaty kid. So I really like cold temperatures, but I wasn't expecting it quite that cold.
Did you have a crew with you for this event?
So my husband was there, who has never seen, other than a finish line of an ultra, he's never crewed anybody or done
Oh,
anything.
okay.
And one of my really good girlfriends, who I actually ran the Grand Canyon with, she was pacing me and she was crewing for me. So she was kind of helping my husband along of what to expect and where to be at the right times. And she has paced that race. Her husband has ran it. So she's already
Oh,
done that
okay.
specific race as a pacer. So, and that was it. Just those two folks.
Um, did you know any of the other runners that you were at the starting line with?
I knew one other runner up from Kitsap County, and he finished. I think he finished in the early 20-hour area. So
Oh,
he's
okay.
quite a bit faster than me. And I saw him and his girlfriend, and just kind of waved hi at the start line, and then they were into their race mode stuff. So I didn't know
Yeah.
anybody else that was going to be running with me.
And so, as you mentioned, that the course has changed over the years. I also ran it in 2018. So, when I was looking at the map of the race now, I was like, "Oh, how is it different?" And certainly, the way that you loop the first loop that you do before you come back to the starting line area at Olali Lake,
Mm-hmm.
is that right?
Yep.
So, did you see your crew again when you, after kind of doing the loop around the lake and coming back through? And what mile was that you saw your crew that first time?
Mile 12, you go right back to the start line at
Okay.
mile 12. You loop around two lakes, and then mile 12 to mile 40, you don't see anybody again. There's a couple of aid
Okay.
stations. So 12, 40, 70, and the finish is pretty much where you can have
Okay.
your troops. The big changes are in 2020, a huge portion of that burnt. And what used to be really soft, loamy pine trails is now just rocks and dirt.
Okay.
And so the substrate burnt out of the trails, and it's a really rough course for a lot of it now. The first 25 ish miles are in this burn section, and you're just constantly kicking or rolling over rocks for endless miles. And then you finish in that same, you don't have to do that loop again, but you come back through that burn section. So on tired legs, you're then dodging lemon size rocks in the center of the trail that are just free flowing. Yeah.
Oh, that's not the way the PCT is supposed to be.
No, it's not.
Did you know that there was going to be that kind of terrain before?
No, I didn't. I
Okay.
knew that some of it, that other people had said there's some rocky sections. And I think, okay, there's some rocky sections of our local trails here too. I had no idea the extent of it. I would have found kind of the crappier trails to run on because
Yeah.
it wasn't easy running. So I would have
Yeah.
trained differently.
Well, so you saw your crew at mile 12, and you saw them again, you said at mile 40.
Hmm.
How were you doing when you saw them at mile 40? How
Mile
was the race
40,
going?
I was feeling great. I was about an hour and a half ahead of where I was expecting to be time wise and just feeling completely jazzed going into the night. So I hit
Mm.
that right before, like right at dusk, mile 40. The one bummer that I ran into right at mile 40 is I was getting, ready for nighttime and I pulled my headlamp out of my bag and it was on already. And I went, oh,
Oh,
farts.
yeah,
I
no.
had no idea if I just bumped it or how long it had been on. I did have a backup. And so I, put the backup in my pack and headed out down the road. It failed at about 45 minutes after turning it back on. And so then I had this brand new headlamp that I'd never ran in before for my only, other than a cell phone, was going to be my backup. I had it
Yeah,
at a pretty low level light, which limited my vision because I didn't want this only light to run out on me. And I knew I had like
yeah.
12 hours of darkness to deal with a untested headlamp that should have just been my backup. So, but like
Oh,
spirits wise, I was great at mile 40. Came in there having fun. I put headphones on for overnight just to kind of distract me and keep me moving. And yeah, so it was good.
and you were doing well on your nutrition and hydration and all that was going okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a timer set. So every half an hour, it would remind me to eat something. And I try to eat about 200 calories every half hour. So that was
Yeah.
my goal because it takes me a long time to keep going. So I need to eat at least something every half hour. I was doing great with nutrition and drinking and going to the bathroom just fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And then mile 70, is that when you're going to pick up a pacer?
Yeah. So
Oh, okay.
that was interesting too. I didn't read the fine print to know that I couldn't have a
Oh,
pacer overnight
oh,
because mile 40 was right at dusk. Mile 70 was right before sunrise. And so I had the whole night to run by myself. It's an out and back course. So you pass people, kind of frequently and into aid stations. But besides that, I wasn't really running with anybody. Dark. And my headlamp was pretty low. Mile 70 picking up my pacer was great. So this gal is one of my best friends on the planet. And she's kind of a firecracker in the best sort of way, like
yeah.
this positive, just outwardly cheering person. And that's what I need to keep going. She's like, all right, we have this much time to get it done. Let's go. So it was really good to pick her up.
And that was in the morning time.
Yep, 4:30 in the morning is when I
Yeah,
picked her
okay.
up.
And then did she take you all the way to the finish then?
Yeah, there's no place
Mm.
for your pacers to drop except at an aid station, and then they have to wait to pack up to go out from there. So
Yeah.
yeah, she ran with
Okay.
me that whole time.
And so, yeah, why don't you walk us through mile 70 to the finish, how things went and whether according to plan or not?
Things got really creative from mile 70 on. I've never done an event where I've hallucinated before. Fortunately, it started during the day. It wasn't overnight when I was by myself, so I didn't have anything spooky or scary. In the burn sections, there's these timbers that fall down. It started looking structural to me. So I thought I saw a building. I'm like, man, I'm going to use the bathroom when we get to that building. Like, how cool is that it's out
Yeah.
here? And she's like,
Yeah.
there's no building. And then I'm running a little bit farther, and there's this sunny patch with a log in there. And I'm like, wow, that's like a really big dog out here sunning. I wonder who lost their dog. There's no dog. And then I'm like, is that a person? She goes, there's no person. And, is that a bear? She goes, no, there's no bear. And did a double take type of thing. So my brain was getting pretty creative. The hard part kind of rolled in, and it wasn't even a low. I didn't get deep in the dumps of sads, or people talk about being in a dark place or in a painkiller or
Hmm.
whatever. I was pretty happy and jovial the whole time. I was watching my pace slip lower and lower and lower, and my heart rate climbing higher and higher and higher for the effort that I was putting forward. And she's like, all right, we need to do, these next 3 miles, let's hit 16-minute miles for these. And I was like, all right. And you see an 18:30 and then another 18-minute and then maybe a 17-minute. There's nothing flat on that course. Everything's either up or down. There's very little flat. And I couldn't work any harder than I was working. And I was still seeing that pace just get slower and slower. And about 11 miles out, I realized I'm not going to make it. I'm getting emotionally even thinking about it. Not that I wasn't going to make it. So 70 was the last time check. I made the cutoff time by about half an hour at mile 70. So I had 9.5 hours to hit that, like 30 miles left. And in about 11 miles, it kind of sunk in that it wasn't going to be mathematically possible unless I threw down some like 12-minute miles after all of this. It
Yeah.
wasn't mathematically possible to finish. And I thought, well, like now I have a choice because I have 2 aid stations to go. And I thought, well, why not just keep going and see what you got? And so it was probably like 2 minutes of like, I could just drop at this aid station and end the suffering. I don't have to kick any more rocks. I'm not going to have to do any of this again. And I was like, well, why would I let an arbitrary time limit what I'm going to do? So like they can't take the 100-mile finish away from me, even if I'm over time. And I figured, all right, let's go. And so I just kept going. I have a heart rate limiter on my watch. It sends me a chime when it gets over 185. So anytime I was climbing, it was like pinging at me. And I'm like, oh, trying so hard just to keep going. Like an 18-minute mile at 185 beats per minute. It's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I just didn't have anything left to go any faster. And that was frustrating because I felt good and I was eating. So it wasn't like I was out of nutrition or anything. I just didn't have the gas left to keep going at the speed I needed to finish on time.
Were those 2 aid stations in between, did they have their own cutoffs?
No,
Cutoff times?
no.
No, they didn't. Okay.
Yeah. The only cutoff time was 70, and then
And
mile
finish.
40 had one, mile 70 had one, and then the finish. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you know at this time when you're doing the math about getting to the finish before the cutoff time, do you know if there are any runners behind you at this point?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've passed folks in the morning, and most of them were pretty banged up from being on the trail for whatever reason, their feet or their
Yeah.
knees or something was going on with them. So passing folks when you're pushing 18-minute miles, they're really hurting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's quite a few people behind me. It was a pretty high attrition rate for this race. I think it was close to 50% didn't finish this race course.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah. That is pretty high. So you made the decision to keep going though,
yeah,
because you had set out to run 100 miles and there's nothing preventing you from actually completing 100 miles on your feet.
right.
You just kept on pressing on.
Yeah.
Were the aid station volunteers encouraging you and giving you lots of excitement? Did they know that you were looking to
I
miss
don't
the cutoff time?
I don't think that they knew that the people coming in around me were going to miss it. So they
Okay.
were just, their normal positive selves, get you
Yeah.
in, get you out, get you on your way. I don't sit. I sat down twice for the race. Mile 40, I changed my socks, and mile 70, I changed my socks and shoes. Besides that, I didn't sit down. I don't stop. I like to eat and move at the same time because that's at least going forward. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
relentless forward progress is important to me. So if I'm sitting, I'm really hurting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't sit down or spend a lot of time at the aid stations. It's pretty much like a all you can eat buffet to go for me. But yeah, they're just their normal encouraging selves through the aid stations.
So why don't you walk us through then those last moments as you're obviously past time, but yet you're still going to get all the way to 100 miles. So it must have felt great to accomplish the distance, but maybe you could walk us through the finish.
So it was kind of crazy because I was still able to run, which I thought was really neat, even though there was no uphill running at all. There's just an uphill slog, but I was
Mm-hmm.
still running, and my pacer was like, "I can't believe you're still running. Like, how are you still running? We're at mile 95. We're at mile 98. How are you still running? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, I'm fine. Like, I just wish I could move faster."
Yeah.
It was really kind of surreal that I was able to do that. Yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, wow, my body held up. I've had a torn labrum in my hip that I know about that I'm going to be having fixed. And I thought, man, the wheels could come off at any time. So I kept thinking, well, everything's moving, just keep going. And I was so excited that I was able to keep going, even though it was overtime.
Mm.
I was just excited. I was excited to be able to do it, excited that my body held up for that long. the crazy things I was seeing with hallucinations were kind of wild, but they were all kind of fun things. And I was just, yeah, I was happy to be able to do it. So I think that's just joy, being able to try it and get to the start line, and then knowing that I'm going to get to the finish line was a pretty joyous thing. Yeah.
And there, I assume that the finish line was still set up. That it
Um,
wasn't like it had been torn down by the time you got
no,
there.
no, I rolled in there about 25 minutes too late, and I was the first person to cross the finish line after that golden hour ended.
Oh, okay.
So they were all still there, and the race director, they came over and congratulated me for finishing and handed me this lovely glass that had Mountain Lakes 100 on it. And it was fantastic because everybody was still there and eating and kind of celebrating on their own. So
Yeah.
they handed me a stack of pancakes, which was amazing.
That's quite an award right there.
It really is.
Yeah. Oh, well, how wonderful. Well, let's talk. I'm curious to know, you had made the comment that if you had known about the terrain, that you might have trained a little bit differently from that. What other surprises or what other things did you learn in this 100-mile journey that would have you might have done differently had you known?
I definitely would have hit more technical single track trails had I known. And I think that for my long run, so I had a 50 miler that I did as my longest training run. And I would have done it after a work day and started it maybe at 10 o'clock at night. So worked all day, gotten home, had dinner with the family and done that stuff, and then gone out and started my 50 miler overnight instead of doing it with the best. You wake up and you get a good night's sleep and a good breakfast, and then you go run 50 miles. It's a lot different when you're running throughout the day and you finish at 8 o'clock
Yeah.
at night than it is running overnight and into the next day. So I would have changed my training time for that 50 miler for sure.
Mm.
And I probably would have pushed my pace a little bit more, just my overall training pace. I run with a group of ladies that they're very gracious because they weren't training for this race. So
Yeah.
they are still putting in big miles. I would trade out trail friends. So I'd, go run 25 miles with one person and then pick up another 10 with another person. And so I would run 15 miles before I meet a group of people, but
Hmm.
we're a very casual group of ladies when we're out running. I probably should have picked up my own pace for training miles a little bit more. So trained quite a bit faster than when I was running. I think that would have been helpful.
How do you feel like this was a good experience training for this and finishing the 100-mile distance? Do you feel differently about yourself? How curious to know the after effects of this whole thing.
I've always known I'm a stubborn person.
Hmm.
But I know that I'm a really stubborn person. Like I stubbornly won't quit something that I want to finish. And that's long training days and early nights to bed and, skipping going out and doing a bunch of other stuff so that I can put the effort into training. And then racing, it surprised me how well I did. So I PR'd my 100K during the race by like 2
Oh,
hours.
wow. Oh, wow.
So I was super proud of the effort that I put forth. I don't think that it changed any part of my being other than I know I'm a little bit more stubborn than I thought I was in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's made me hungry to do another 100. I think I'll be a bit more choosy on the amount of time allotted. So a race with a little bit more generous cutoff time, I think is probably going to be my next one. So yeah,
And what was the cutoff time?
30 hours.
It was 30 hours. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some out there with as many as 40 or even 48 for the really tough 100 milers. They'll give you 48. But yeah, it's an interesting factor in all the different variables of a race is that cutoff time makes a really big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I dialed in kind of what clothing works best and, the vest that I love and what I can hold and what I like to carry and all that stuff. And so, that's been a couple of years of work in progress to get those type of nuances dialed in. So I wouldn't really change the gear that I had or anything like that. Just, yeah, I think I'll be a little bit more choosy with the terrain. I mean, maybe actually do my homework a little bit more before up for something, so I know what I'm looking at ahead of time.
So you know you're going to do another 100 mile, or you just don't know which one yet.
Correct. Or when. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking at probably 6 weeks on crutches, getting my hip fixed. So it's going to be a building year after that to get back up to stuff. It needs to get fixed. So that's going to be over this winter.
Okay.
And so probably not 25, maybe looking at 26.
Well, that'll give you plenty of time to heal from the surgery and get back into top shape.
Yeah.
Did you have any recovery issues after running 100 miles? Were there any part of your body that needed extra attention, or did you need to do anything specifically to recover from this?
My feet were the worst thing for my whole body. I was actually really surprised I didn't have really sore muscles. My triceps hurt worse than my legs did. So I feel like my training went really well because my legs weren't shot after 100 miles. We have stairs in our house, and I made it up and down the stairs and moving around pretty confidently. I went back to work, and but my feet took a special beating. I think from the rocks, I had some pretty deep bone bruises on the bottom of my feet. And so it took a few extra days before I could walk barefoot or do anything. I'm a few less toenails into this. But as far as recovery, my feet was the biggest thing. And what surprised me was the brain fog. So I work, I have to chart on patient care after I work with folks. And I wasn't able to keep up with the one-on-one patient care and the charting. And so I came home and had to do a couple extra hours of work that I usually don't do. I can keep right on top of it. And I had some significant brain fog that prevented me from doing that.
Isn't that a surprising thing?
It was.
How much the brain actually almost takes it the worst?
Yeah. Yeah. So that part of my recovery was completely unexpected. And I don't know that anyone really talks about it. No one tells you that you're an idiot after you do these things.
Right.
It feels
it's wild.
Yeah, it feels it's a new experience for sure.
Well, I like your idea of doing your long run overnight. Doing it after
he's jumping on me.
He just wants some attention.
Yeah.
Hello, pup. It's been really fun listening to your tale of your journey, and of course, I've been really a little bit personally interested in this only because by following you on social media, I've been so excited for what you were doing, and I was really excited to hear the recap and hear how it all went. So this has been a fun thing for me to hear, and congratulations on finishing 100 miles because you totally did that.
Thank you.
25 minutes past cutoff, but you still got your finish. You got a glass.
Yeah, got a glass, and it's on Strava. So
that's right. Nobody can take Strava away.
No one can take it away. I just, it's such a strange thing because I'm 47, and so I'm in my later 40s, and I work and I have a family and a lot of other stuff, a lot of other things going on. And so being able to train for it and run it and actually, I feel like I did really well because I did enough where I got to finish, even if it wasn't on time. I still ran that 100 miles. I feel like a lot of people don't put their name in the hat worrying about a bunch of things that really don't matter. So, yeah. All those, like the imposter syndrome, I think is pretty strong with ultra runners, or runners in general, and so people just don't even try. And I think people are capable of so much more than they give themselves credit for. So it's pretty neat.
Do you have advice for people who are training for their first ultra? Something you would like to inspire them with?
Oh gosh, I think, like, very first ultra, looking at it, just have fun, man. It's such a different sport than like road marathons. I guess ultras can be on the road also, but especially on trails, is you just go have fun, go check out neat stuff, and kind of smile. That's my advice. Is I just embrace the funness of it. You don't get to go goof off as an adult very often, and you get to goof off and eat a whole bunch of snacks. It's like, who wouldn't enjoy that? So
that sounds perfect.
That's my advice. And lube everything.
Yeah, chafing is a real thing. I don't know that we talk about it enough because a lot of times maybe the areas that get affected by chafing are the areas that we don't like to talk about
Yeah.
in public.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can slow down a race or kill a race, really. So it's a massively important thing. I'm glad that you mentioned that you had sort of figured out the pants thing a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really suffered from chafing extensively. And so finding the right products to use and the right clothing is kind of a game changer for me. I figured out, along the way what really didn't work. So I had to figure out what would. I'm salty. And as soon as that salt starts to dry, it's just like a sandpaper. So
Sandpaper. Yeah. Ugh, so uncomfortable. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here on Ultra Origins. It was really fun to just hear your account of this, and congratulations on finishing 100 miles on your feet. It's quite an accomplishment.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate.
Thank you for joining us, April. It was so good to meet you. If you have recently finished your first ultra, or if you've recently completed a major new distance and would like to share your story here in this series, go to honoredendurance.com and click on Ultra Origins at the top of the page. Thank you for watching. I look forward to sharing more Ultra Origin stories with you.